Guts and Glory is probably the most complicated and sophisticated original exhibition the museum has ever done. It's not only an exhibition, but it's also a huge educational project. This is the 100th year, the centennial for the creation of the country of Czechoslovakia, and how are we going to recognize that? What are we going to do that's different, a story that people haven't heard?
Within the story of World War I is this beautiful story of the Czech Legion and how Czechoslovakia came to be. It is really a story of determination and of perseverance and really a triumph of the human spirit.
This story is the classic epic of history. It involves multiple countries, many world leaders. Austria-Hungary, of course, was an empire of about 12 nationalities. The Czechs and Slovaks didn't like being a part of the Austro-Hungarian Empire. And while they were in POW camps in Russia, an exiled old professor from Prague, Tomas Masaryk, he was a fugitive at this point, came to them and said, boys, if you want to join an army, I can take you to France. We'll fight for the Allies, the British and the French and the Americans, and if we do so, they'll give us our own country. It seemed like a ridiculous proposition. They would have to cross all of Siberia, 5,000 miles. They would have to get on ships at Vladivostok, circle the globe, land in France, fight on the Western Front. Most of them would probably get killed. And in return for this, their peoples would be liberated in an entirely new country.
Kevin McNamara wrote a really fascinating book about the Legion and the formation of Czechoslovakia called Dreams of a Great Small Nation. So we're working closely with him to get his insight on what the real challenges were for these soldiers.
Kevin devised two characters that were based on composites of different bits of data that he sort of found as a historian, really humanizing those men. So one is Joseph and one is Peter. I got to know these people, I could imagine backstories, and I drew them a number of times before I came to something that I thought these look like people that I could imagine.
Why did they do what they did, and what were they feeling? What were their fears, their hopes? Because in fact, they did really hold their own destiny in their hands.
One of the goals of the museum is to educate from the stories, the history of the Czechs and Slovaks. But what makes this so exciting is working with students from the Iowa Big program and from Metro High School. They are contributing to the content of this exhibit. They own this exhibit.
The National Czech-Slovak Museum and Library, they came to us.
And they said, hey, we have this crazy idea. We're going to have this exhibit in 2 years. We were thinking maybe a VR exhibit would be cool. And there's a bunch of us who were like, yeah, we don't know anything about that, but that sounds awesome.
The partnership between the museum and the STEAM Academy is really fantastic because it allows our high school students to have access to the museum staff and their collections.
Working on the train car, we get history credit and some industrial engineering credit as well.
In 2017, we began collaborating on a massive script. And what I did initially was I broke down the entire story into 10 very specific little events that, had they not happened, this story would have turned out differently.
This isn't just about creating virtual reality and the technology that goes along with it, but also the students picked up the book that illustrates what happened in this scenario and they read through it.
So the story's at the core, and then around it they pick up the parts of World War I.
When I tell a lot of people who are just blown away by it, it's like, wait, you're learning about history from an actual historian and then you're implementing that history into a virtual reality exhibit that you're making yourself.
We've worked our way backwards. We talked about what we were building, and then it came to why we were building it and then what it represents, and they didn't even know about the real train. And what's really fun about it is the process. It started out as building it, but then it turned into, let's build it good, let's make it look right.
The students from Iowa Big came to a board meeting to show the board members about the virtual reality and what they were doing. And it was great fun. We got to try on the goggles. But we asked one of the students, what have you learned from doing this project? And he said, well, I've learned all about World War I and these brave soldiers, and I can't believe what they did. And I sat there and I thought, wow, this kid is not only developing technical skills, but he actually is going to remember history.
We get the facts that they won't teach you in a classroom. They wouldn't teach you about all the little nitty-gritty details and all the uncomfortable things that really did happen to the soldiers.
Students get scared about stuff and they get passionate about stuff, and they're essentially the same age. They're frozen in Siberia, and they're trying to make their way literally around the world so they can help found their nation. Like, what an inspirational story for students to engage with.
It was just amazing how they could just fight for what they believed in. I mean, the odds were just completely against them, and just amazing how they just had the willpower to just go day by day and just make it through.
I hope that this project will bring light to what actually happened to the Czech and Slovaks, and it's kind of like an untold story, and I hope it shows people what they actually went through and helps them experience what they went through too.
I want them to feel like they just lived through it. That'd be kind of cool.
I think that people will really be able to see that these were actual real men who had lives back home, but they were trying to get something better and willing to make the sacrifice because they knew that in the end they would have their own freedom and their own country.
It's not only a Czechoslovak story, it's a human story. It's a story about sacrifice for freedom and identity, and that's going on today.
If people come together around common goals and values, if they stick together, and if they persevere, there's nothing they can't accomplish.
Guts and Glory is just the beginning of what we want to do in education, using the Czech and Slovak story to help teach students today. That's our future.